Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3763. Today's date is today's date is 17th of December 2025. It's been almost like night at 9:58 p.m. Sorry, I just had a dinner. All right, let's just jump into the question. Let's go. All right. The question is, what if animal form their own societies? Oh, that's a really good question. All right, yeah. First of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Why am I asking this question to myself? What if question is always really interested way to give the answer. It kind of like a force you to think about that reality. When I try to think about that reality or when I try to create that reality, I'm kind of like utilizing my knowledge and information and experience that I've been through, and somehow when I try to utilize this knowledge and information, it kind of like felt really good. It kind of like felt that knowledgeable, probably. Disclaimer: the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. It's a raw, it's unfiltered, it's just my opinion. So do not believe in any kind of like a simple information that I'm saying, or do not seek for any kind of like information that I'm saying. It's just my opinion, and opinion are subjective. Now, regarding about the question says that what if animal could form their societies? Societies means what? A societies means like basically human society. The way that we are kind of like a living like that. Okay, yeah. So what if kind of like an animal could have their societies? Well, if I'm kind of like a something that if I'm thinking about that, most of the animal kind of like live by societies. Not most of the animal, but some of the animal. Like ants, okay, they are living societies. Okay, yeah, they live with the thousands of ants in one place. Okay, yeah. Elephant, they are also live with their own species. Elephants. Okay, yeah. Dolphins, whales, they are also live with the same species, right? uh, I don't know, but probably is this thing. Most of the animal are kind of like simply live in the society. It's not really that birds are also live with the societies in their kind of like in their birds and things like that. Okay, yeah. It's not really that like probably no one lives like everyone every like I don't know, yeah. Like I think that na ki I'm not really sure. I found so many animals are kind of like a live with societies, live with their own societies. Birds, rhino, giraffe, horses, okay, elephant. Mm, like I just kind of like a simply I kind of like I kind of there are a couple of animals who are not live in societies. Um, lions, okay, yeah, tigers, uh, this I think those are kind of like some animal who are not live with their own kind. Okay, yeah. Like basically lions and tiger, they are live with their families, but they are not live with the kind of like some multiples of tiger at the one place. I haven't really seen them. I like maybe I seen them kind of like a one or two, but I haven't really seen them like a basically hundreds of tigers are kind of like at the same place. I haven't really seen them. Okay, yeah. But horses, goats, elephants, giraffe, rhino, uh, rhino, yeah, rhino also. Okay, yeah. Then birds, insects, ants, like probably every animal are kind of like a live with the society. It's not really that they are not live with the society. Okay, yeah. Now, why does kind of like something the animals or we are kind of like live the society? Why is that? Nature has a kind of like a simply law. Okay, yeah. What kind of like a law that nature has? Nature always supports survive. Okay, yeah. Means like that a species can able to be survive, only that species kind of like assembly survive, rest of the species will gonna die. Like this is what kind of like some natural selection will gonna happen. Like this is what it is now. This is what kind of like a upgradation happened and things and that and that. Okay, yeah. Because the nature are kind of like a select such a species that kind of like a survive in kind of like a harsh environment, weather pattern, with a kind of like a carnivorous animals or things or that and that. And it kind of like a really helpful for every species. Okay, yeah. So that's why every species are wanted to be kind of like a alive, wanted to be kind of like simply alive. Now the problem is that na ki if you wanted to live alive, like if you wanted to survive, there are multiple things happen. Like survive means what? Like I'm not talking about kind of like a survive means like right now we are surviving. No, I'm talking about a kind of like a simply humans, animals, and everything. Okay, yeah. If an animal wanted to be survive, we cannot able to survive that much. Why? Because of that ki every species has its kind of like a own unique thing that other species does not have it. Example, like a cheetah can run really fast. Okay, yeah. So because of he can run really fast, he can kind of like a somebody run for hunting. Like basically, no animal can beat him. Okay, so basically he can get the dinner or lunch very easily. Okay, yeah. But we can't able to be run that faster. Okay, yeah. So we are very much vulnerable. Okay, eagles are kind of like they can fly and they can hunt the insects or things like that. Okay, yeah. So and insects cannot able to fly that much. So like basically every species has a kind of like some ups and downs, and this because of this thing, the survive in this wilderness area is far more difficult, very very difficult. Okay, yeah. So every species are wanted to be survive. Okay, yeah. So how does they supposed to be survive? The only way they should supposed to be survive, and actually is a nature's way to supposed to be survive, is that he live with the society or live with a combination of in its own kind. Like basically is this thing. That's why we are kind of like exist. Like humans are really not good at everything. Humans are not meant to be run faster. Humans are not meant to be fly. Humans doesn't really have that kind of like a clever vision. Humans are very vulnerable for every possible way. We don't really have fur, so that we should supposed to protect harsh environment. Okay, yeah. We don't really have that much strength compared to the cows and kind of like other animals and things like that. We are like really vulnerable regarding about everything. Like basically humans are very very vulnerable regarding about surviving. Like basically a rabbit could have kind of like a somebody like a 50% chance, but probably us as a human, we are not. We just have kind of like a simply 1 or 2% chances. And probably history are kind of like a represent that too. Like basically millions of year ago, the average human survive is less than 30 year. Yeah, less than 30 year. Like the life expectancy that we are kind of like a mention, the life expectancy of millions of year ago was almost like a 30 or 20. Yeah, 20 or 25, that's it. Like basically there is no human would kind of like a survive more than 30 year. Why? Because like there are multiple things like a it's not really possible to kind of like live that much longer, because there are multiples of kind of like something like the hunting animals and things and that. No, at that time there is no kind of like a virus and things like that. Like basically at that time, like it might be, but still is this thing now, it has very lows. Like basically is this thing, most of people actually die is because of the kind of like a simply die because of kind of like animals or any kind of like simply snakes or things or that and that. Okay, yeah. But today's we can able to be our life expectancy of human today is almost like a 70 to 80 year. Okay, yeah. No, basically it's really essential to be survived. So that's why we are kind of like a live in the society. So because of we are kind of like we live the society, our survival rate is really high. Okay, and because of our survival rate is really high, that's why we are kind of like a build the society. We are started living together. Then we became social animal. And when we become social animal, we are kind of like somebody creating laws regarding about the society goods and things. We are started believing gods and things and that. Look at around the world yourself. Like look the world, uh, uh, look the world surrounding, which is kind of like something that happened is because of that we are kind of like started living together. Because of it kind of like increase the survival rate. So that's why living societies, yeah. And as also animals are also wanted to be live in the societies too, right? Yeah. But I still not really understand the question. The question says that what if animal form their own societies? Most of the animal form their own societies too. Okay, yeah, it's not really that, but the question might be kind of like a says that thing ki, what if animal could form their society and they are kind of like simply being really advanced or things or that and that. In that particular case, might be question went to very different scenario. Okay, yeah. But there is a couple of things that I wanted to talk about being in society. Okay, yeah. So when as a human are kind of like a living society, we need a kind of like a laws, and we need a kind of like a some rules and regulations and things and that. And we also have kind of like a one person who could kind of like simply tell us that law, tell us that rules and things like that, that we should supposed to be kind of like a protect our society in every possible harsh environment. Okay, yeah. And this is not just happened on human, it actually happened in every species. Like basically ants have a kind of like a queen. Okay, yeah. Queen is kind of like one of the really essential element for them, for for the kind of like assembly ants, other ants. Okay, yeah. I'm not really sure what kind of like a something the, like they have kind of like a rules, or what kind of like a something the king or queen maybe. I'm not really sure, but in ants they have kind of like a queen. Okay, yeah. In bees they also have their queen too. I'm not really sure they are in the society in like basically the elephant does have kind of like something king or queen or what. I'm not really sure about that, but yeah. Okay, yeah. And another thing is that if I'm gonna say, the whales are very emotional, very emotional species. Okay, as compared to we are also very emotional too, but whales are very emotional, very emotional. Okay, yeah. I watch a kind of like a small video, and basically whales can cry too. Yeah, legitimately whales can cry too, and they kind of like actually form tears. I just don't really understand the logic behind it, because whales should supposed to be live underwater, and what kind of like a something the what kind of, I don't know, is that why does whales can cry? Like legitimately there is a kind of like a video. I'm not really sure that video is kind of like a something legit or not. But there is a kind of like a whale is crying, literally he is kind of like a having a tears. I'm like, what the fuck is that? That animal are kind of like a living underwater. It doesn't make any sense at all. But still it's a really good to like, yeah. And I also knew that ki, yes, whales are very emotional, and when there is an emotional element are actually intact with any kind of like a species, and such species are kind of like a form their societies, then obviously existing throughout their emotional, they would have kind of like a, some sort of rules and things and that and that. And I actually kind of like a suddenly found that thing like a basically is this thing na ki, the baby whale are always kind of like a swim under the mother whale. Okay, yeah, because of that ki, mother whale are always protect their kind of like a simply baby whale in every possible scenario. Okay, yeah. So I don't know, yeah. It's a like, yeah, it's a kind of like things that I seen. Okay, so there is a one fact that I wanted to tell you, completely irrelevant to the question, but let me tell you one thing. Okay, I'm not really sure, but Japan has a kind of like a simply culture of whale hunting. Whale hunting, Japan. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. Japan or Australia. Wait, let me Google it. Probably the whale hunting is actually happening in Japan or what? Uh, whale hunt, whale hunting Japan. Yeah. So Japan has a kind of like a something whale hunting. Okay. By the way, if you wanted to hunt the whale, you cannot able to hunt a whale. Okay, yeah. Why is that? Because there is a universal law, UN law, or kind of like assembly, a world judiciary system through. You cannot hunt the whale. If you hunt, you are kind of like a legalized as a criminal person. Okay, literally, yeah, you are kind of like a legalized criminal person. And another thing is that na ki why does Japan has a kind of like a simply hunting for whale? Because Japan is a like a they are kind of like a somebody creating something. I'm not really sure what exactly is this thing, but um, they have like a, they kind of like a extract a kind of like a somebody oil. That oil is a kind of like a somebody really essential for clothing and things like that, and that oil doesn't really have any kind of like a replacement and things like that. It actually happened almost like a maybe 50 year ago, 50 or maybe yeah 50 or 100 year ago, I'm not really sure. Right now it's bit really controlled, but like a 50 year ago, at that time people are usually kind of like a somebody hunt the whale so much, yeah, for this kind of like a clothing and things like that. Okay. And because of this hunting, it was kind of like a too much, so that the there is a kind of like a something, the whale existence is almost gone. Okay, yeah. Right now, in this entire world, we have very less whale are actually exist, and kind of like a somebody that ki we wanted to preserve the whale as much as we could. We wanted to uh, increase their kind of like a somebody species in number. Okay, yeah. Why does whale are really essential? Whale are really essential in every possible way, because it kind of like a somebody depends on food cycle. Okay, yeah. Because when we are living in the land, okay, yeah, like we are living in the land, and basically every kind of like a species is kind of like a simply have specific food cycle. Okay, yeah. If the one species actually die, other species could kind of like eat you, and you became the food for them. So it's actually sorry, you actually became food for them, and they kind of like simply live and things like that. So basically it's this thing that now whale is um, I'm not really sure, but there are so many very essential things that whale are actually do, regarding about the regarding about like they excrete something. I'm not really sure what exactly is this thing. Like basically we excrete stool. Okay, like we kind of like a shit. Okay, yeah, our shit is like it's a kind of like a sort of biological thing. Okay, like I'm kind of like a talking really shit, but it's a very it's a very like a not good thing. Okay, yeah, for us, but it kind of like a somebody, it kind of like a good for the pigs and things like that. Okay, yeah, somewhat something. I'm not really sure about that. Okay, yeah. But the whales, the way that whale excretes from their stool, it's a kind of like a really very essential food for other other kind of like a simply seafood, other kind of like a sea animal or things like that. I'm not really sure, you just have to google it. But it's a kind of like a simply very essential. The whale here kind of like a simply supports the food cycle in the ocean. Okay, yeah. And having more number of whales are somewhat something really essential for them. But regarding about the numbers, like basically what I'm, there is a kind of like a nature cycle. Okay, let me give you the context. Okay, yeah. When the size of the animal are so tiny, then it kind of like a possible that those in those kind of like a sort of species are in millions in number. Like basically ants are kind of like a millions or trillions in number. Why? Because they are very small in number, they are very small in size. Okay, yeah. When you are kind of like increase the size of the animal or increase the size of any kind of like a something animal, then possible chance that their number is kind of like a little bit low. Okay, yeah. So even if we are kind of like making sure that our kind of like assembly ocean is far more good and things, and kind of like a be more fertile land for kind of like a make the whale produce much more whale, but they cannot able to produce that much whale because of that ki whale are a very big animal. Okay, it's one of the biggest animal in our planet, and because of this thing their number are little bit lower. Okay, yeah. So probably it might be, let's just say, uh, like a 1 million probably in entire planet. 1 million is too much. Yeah, probably we don't really have 1 million whale. We might have kind of like a couple of thousands of whale probably. Let me clarify how many whale. Sorry for this. Like, let me clarify. How many whales are in the world? Okay, yeah, probably in thousand, not in million. Million was too much. Okay, 1.5 million. 1.5 million is not really that much big number. Okay, yeah, but that is true, by the way. Regarding about the sizes, it does not, it like basically what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, that even if we make our ocean become very fertile in every possible way to kind of like produce the whale in a very higher number, but still whale cannot able to be cross billion, probably not. And why is that? Because it's in big in size. Okay, that's what kind of like nature decides that. I don't know how do I supposed to explain this thing, but nature, like, let me, in the Jurassic area, I'm not really sure, but in the Jurassic era, the dinosaurs are actually exist are everywhere. Okay, yeah. But even if the dinosaur are actually exist in everywhere, but still they are not in very big number. Like basically is this thing that human are actually available in every corner of the planet, and we are in almost like a billion, like 8.8 billion people are actually live on this planet. Okay, yeah. But the in the Jurassic era, or like I am not kind of like considering this thing, because the in the dinosaur era is not just kind of like somebody just a couple of year, it's a kind of like millions of year. So even if that in that particular time that entire earth is became more fertile for dinosaur, but after all those things, dinosaur are not in that big number. Probably they might not cross in billion in number, probably. I'm not really sure, but yeah, I think that. And why is that? Because nature actually decide in that way. Because if such an animal is kind of like simply in big in size, then it has kind of like a less in number. If the animal is kind of like a small in size, it is more in number. Okay, so it's somewhat something. So I think that ki, and dinosaur is not a small in size. It's definitely not, because dinosaur is a kind of like a simply uh like okay, how do I supposed to how like let me explain it. I'm not really sure about this scientific point of perspective, but let me figure it out. Let me try to tell you. Okay, yeah. Why does whale are kind of like so much in big size? Why is that? Because of that, ki whale doesn't really get food every single time. Okay, like basically we are eating twice in a day. Okay, yeah. Every other animal are not getting that much food every single day. Doesn't really at all. Sometimes kind of like a whale getting food once in a day, or maybe kind of like a somebody just, yeah, once in a day, or I don't know, yeah, but they are kind of like getting very less food, probably that. Okay, yeah. So when they are kind of like simply getting less food, so what exactly is this thing? So how does they supposed to be survive and things like that? So nature are kind of like simply do something very different. Okay, yeah. Do something different means what? Okay, I'm gonna kind of like give the exam. I'm gonna kind of like simply giving little bit of explanation regarding about why the whale are kind of like so much big in size. Okay, so for this particular, we have to do some sort of experiment. What you have you ever feel that ki when you went to the swimming pool, you kind of like feel that little less weight of your body. Okay, yeah. Like have you ever feel that? Yeah, definitely. We all feel that when you went inside the water, somehow we feel kind of like a little less weight of our body. And why is that thing? Is because of that the water is kind of like something uplift us. Now how does water is kind of like uplift us? What is actually is this thing? So let me tell you one thing, the concept of buoyancy, like it's what okay okay like basically is this thing, there are so many big ships are kind of like a made up by the steel, and steel are kind of like a meant to be drowned, but after all those things, steel ships are kind of like somebody does not sink. Why is that? Because of the buoyancy. It's very hard to kind of like somebody associate this concept, and I'm not really sure about this particular concept. Okay, let me clarify what exactly is this thing. Okay, yeah. So water is a kind of like a somebody have its own weight too. Okay, yeah. And let me tell you one thing now, ki water is a kind of like a thing that it's a very dense in its own way. Okay, it's a very dense in its own way. Like let me tell you, what you have to do is that ki take a plate. Okay, take a plate. Okay, yeah. And you don't have to drown that plate, you just have to put that plate on the surface of the water. Okay, yeah. Now what you have to do is that you just have to push that plate to sink in. Okay, yeah, but do not sink that plate in kind of like a somebody in vertical way, kind of like a sink as a kind of like a somebody horizontal, a kind of like a somebody a landscape way. Okay, yeah. And when you try to do this thing, you kind of like a feel that ki water is not letting that plate down for a while. Why? Because of that the shape of the plate, because the shape of the plate is kind of like a bottom is kind of like a look like a kind of like a something a concave. Okay, yeah. So it kind of like a displays the water from its own space, and that's why water is not letting you do this thing. That's why kind of like water is kind of like a dense in its own way, and that's why water is not letting you kind of like a something that key occupied, like it does not, it's kind of like a simply water is kind of like a does not let go its territory. So that is somewhat I don't know how do I supposed to explain this. I'm not kind of like a really scientific nerd that way, but I just like I kind of like experience this thing. Okay, yeah. It's not really experience, I just kind of like watch a video, I'm trying to explain in every single possible way. Okay, so this is what actually happened. Okay, like if you wanted to kind of like a sink that particular plate, it does not sink that much, you put a lot of effort and then it will gonna sink. Same thing happened with the ship too, because of the ship are kind of like something so big in size, and it kind of like a simply have shapes like a kind of like a simply concave at the bottom. Like basically it has that kind of like a simply concave, like basically it has kind of like a simply this thing that it displays the water in its way. So the water is kind of like a simply pushing upward, and kind of like a weight of that ship is kind of like a pushing downward, and the weight and the ship is kind of like a maintain the balance between both and things like that, kind of like a weight of the ship as well as kind of like a something the water displacement and things and that and that's why all the ships are kind of like a made up of steel, but they are not drown that much because of that. It's a kind of like the way that it created that way. Okay, yeah. So do you understand this concept? Now same thing happened, same thing concept is actually happened in a whale too. Okay, now what is actually happened, that key okay, besides let's talk about the whale, let's talk about the human. Okay, we are talk about human. Okay, so when we are trying to walk, okay, you are walking by leg. Okay, yeah, you are walking by leg. Okay, yeah. So when you are kind of like moving from one place to another place, what exactly happened, you are kind of like simply putting effort. Okay, you are putting effort, but if you are try to do this thing in the swimming pool, it kind of like became very easily. Okay, yeah. Like easily means what, like just try to just do it. Okay, yeah, you just go into the swimming pool. Okay, not that much deep. If you're not went to the swimming, if you're not kind of like a swimming that much, go into the swimming pool. Okay, yeah, and try to move your body from this position to 5 feet further. The effort required to go from your position to 5 feet further, it's kind of like a very less as compared to when you kind of like simply walk on the land. And why is that? Because in the land there is no kind of like assembly, there is no water, nothing really at all. And if you wanted to move, we have to put the effort, we have to kind of like simply walk and things like that. It's kind of like a make me little bit effort. So when we are kind of like putting the effort and things like that, it kind of like simply we are doing against the gravity. Okay, we are kind of like doing against the gravity, because when we are trying to push ourselves to further we are kind of like we are holding its weight. Like basically my weight is almost like a 75 kilogram. Okay, yeah. So basically what is actually happened, that my leg are not only kind of like simply handling my weight, as well as it kind of like simply sustain the gravities. Like it kind of like a fight with the gravity too. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing that my leg kind of like a simply have two different thing at the same time. It not only balance my body, but as well as kind of like simply carry my weight, and as also I have to be move ahead too. So basically is this saying that key, for this particular purpose I'm losing lot of effort, I'm losing lot of energy while doing it that. And when I'm kind of like doing it that, I need a kind of like simply muscles. Okay, I need muscles, and for that particular thing our hip area are kind of like a so much muscular. Okay, like look at your hip. Okay, yeah, your hip or your kind of like a thighs are kind of like so much massive, because it is kind of like simply holding your weight, as well as kind of like it can help you to kind of like simply go further, right? It's kind of like simply go further. Now basically what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that key, we cannot able to kind of like simply add more muscles. And why is that? When we add more muscles, it can carry more weight, and when it carry more weight, then probably our legs are cannot able to move that much, because it's not feasible to us. So that's why kind of like simply obese are kind of like a walk very differently. Why is that? Because they are kind of like a simply body muscle are not meant to be kind of like a simply handling their weight and things and that, because our kind of like a gravity is kind of like a winning that particular context. And that's why as a obese people are kind of like a walk very funnily and things like that, because it's not a kind of like a things. So that's why our human body are always kind of like a lean. Okay, yeah, always kind of like some lean. Okay, like it's not meant to be that ki obese people cannot able to be walk. Yeah, it's they can walk. Okay, yeah, but they are kind of like simply this thing that because of the weight of that muscle is too much, so it's not really feasible. Okay, yeah, it's not really feasible to them. Okay, yeah, and as also human body doesn't really not really good at kind of like simply fat things, fat kind of like simply storage and things like that, because like let me tell you one thing, the way that we store our fat, like basically our belly fat and things and that, it's somewhat something really good. Okay, in kind of like assembly in natural point of perspective. Okay, yeah. Because when we kind of like stored, we have fat, that fat is kind of like assembly have a little bit of energy, and that energy is kind of like a utilize for our daily tasks and things and that. But probably it's not really kind of like a really good thing for us, because we cannot able to move that much and things and that, our legs are not really that much stronger for this particular process. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing that key, first of all, human body are not meant for kind of like simply storing that much amount of fat. And even after we did that thing, we cannot able to be kind of like a move that much or things like that, because our legs are cannot able to be do that much thing. Okay, it's not really good. So that's why our human body are not meant to be kind of like a store that much fat, and that's why we need a kind of like a simply food every single day. Okay, that's why we need food every single day, because is this thing now, it's that key, we need a muscles, but we don't need that much muscles. Okay, yeah. Now let me give you another example. Take a birds. Okay, yeah. Birds can eat every single time. Now why the birds can eat every single time? Because they cannot able to be stored energy inside of them. They cannot able to be stored muscles or fat inside of them. Why? Because they have to be fly, and if they wanted to be fly, they need to have very less weight. And so for that particular thing, nature decided that a bird should supposed to be eat every single time, because that's the time they are kind of like actually meant to be get energy every single time. Okay, and whatever they eat, they kind of like utilize, they get the energy, and they utilize that energy to fly and things like that. They cannot able to be store that energy into the fats and things like that. So that's why birds are meant to be small. Okay, yeah, birds are meant to be small. The people who are kind of like a land or things like that, they have little bit of kind of like somewhat something muscles, but not too much. When you are too much, then probably you can able to be move very slowly. Take an elephant. Elephant is a kind of like a very big fat, but it cannot able to move that much faster. Why? Because it kind of like have a lot of amount of fats and things like that, which kind of like somebody struggling to kind of like a gravity and things like that. Now the scenario change in the ocean, because ocean are kind of like a really help you to support for more and more fats. Okay, yeah. Now why is that thing? Because of that, कि when you kind of like actually supports more and more fats, then probably you are kind of like a in size in very much bigger, as well as when you are kind of like simply swimming in the ocean, you are kind of like a very putting very less effort to move forward. Okay, as I mentioned now, like basically water has a kind of like a buoyancy and things like that. It kind of like helps you to things like that, help you to do this like like basically swim faster and things like that. So basically is this thing that key the effort really required for whales are kind of like a very less. Okay, yeah. So that's why they are kind of like a somebody whatever that they can able to eat, they are kind of like a store that energy into their fats and things like that. Okay, so that's why the whales are kind of like simply very big in size, as well as kind of like a simply is this thing, their shapes are also very big in that. Like let me tell you one thing, the cylinder, okay, the cylindrical shapes are really good for kind of like assembly inside water swimming. Why is that? Because cylindrical shape are kind of like a meant to be kind of like assembly occupied like it's a kind of like assembly such a shape that kind of like a really good for kind of like assembly stored fat inside of them, as well as kind of like assembly let them flow very easily and things like that. Okay, yeah. So that's why most of the fishes are in cylindrical shape. Okay, like kind of cylindrical shape. It's not really exactly a cylindrical shape, a kind of like cylindrical shape. Okay, yeah. So it is that. Okay, and also another thing is that na कि birds are getting food every single time. The humans and mammals, the kind of like a species who are in the land, they are kind of like a getting food once in a day. But the animal or any kind of like a species who are kind of like living inside the water, they are kind of like getting very less food. So probably when they are kind of like getting less food, so it is very essential them to kind of like whatever the food that they are getting, they are kind of like store that food into the fats and things like that, because there is no lucky day, there is no kind of like a day that they are getting everyday food and things like that. So that's why the fish and kind of like other animal are kind of like storing fat inside of them, and that's why they are kind of like so big in size. Probably. Okay, so this is what kind of like assembly nature psychology kind of like assembly work on that possible point of perspective. I'm not really sure. I'm kind of like assembly giving this particular kind of like whatever the information that I'm trying to explain this thing. Don't kind of like believe in me, don't believe me. It's like basically I'm kind of like giving a very raw and very unfiltered, very unclarified information to you. You just have to re-verify from the internet. It's kind of like a somewhat something right, somewhat something wrong. Probably. Okay, yeah. I don't know. It's like a basically the kind of like explanation that I provided. It's kind of like a very irrelevant to the question. The question says that what if the animal could form their societies, and probably every animal are a kind of like a form their society. It's not really that. Like basically, yeah. The question that I explained is that ki in the particular scenario, I explained that ki a tiger and lion doesn't really live in the society. Like you actually never really seen a photo where hundreds of tiger or hundreds of lion in the one place. You might not gonna see this kind of like a picture in nothing here. Like probably you might gonna see maybe 2-3 tiger at one place, but not more than that. Why is that? Because tiger are carnivorous animal. Okay, yeah. Carnivorous means like that can able to kind of like eat anything. Okay, yeah. So because of tiger and lions are kind of like a carnivorous animal, so other animal or maybe with their same kind of own species are also kind of like a scared their own species too, because of that ki it's not kind of like a relative to them, it's a kind of like simply food for them. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing, I think it's not really exactly right. I'm not really sure why does kind of like a lions and tigers not live in the society, but I think this might be a kind of like a simply reason, but still I'm not really sure. Don't kind of like a believe me anything at all right. So this is what I kind of like somebody thought about this particular topic. All right, this is it, and thank you.